Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome at this webinar, which is part of the eNSPIRED project of VVOB. My name is Geert Kelchtermans. I'm a professor of education at the KU Leuven, the University of Leuven in Belgium, where I chair the Center for Innovation and the Development of Teacher and School. But today I have the pleasure to chair this webinar on professional learning communities. As a matter of fact, there are more than 200 of you attending this webinar from more than 10 countries from every corner of the globe, which is a great pleasure for us all to host you, and we hope to make this an interesting meeting. Central to this webinar are 4 presentations, but in between we would like to invite you to participate in the exchange as well. After each presentation, there will be some time for clarification questions. And after the final presentation, there is time for more general or comparative discussions. So please feel free to use the chat box to raise questions in the public or private to one of the moderators. Behind the scene, we have Aswita, who will moderate the chat box and pass on your questions. You can write your questions in English, but also in Dutch if you are more comfortable with that. Please let the language not hinder your participation. When a final remark, when asking a question or making a comment in the chat box, please ensure that you first mention where you are, country or city, what your profile or profession is, so we get an idea of the background and the context from where you're coming. As I already indicated, today's webinar is all about professional learning communities. And in its formal definition by Stoll, a professional learning community is described as a group of people sharing and critically interrogating their practice in an ongoing, reflective, collaborative, inclusive, learning-oriented and growth-promoting way, operating as a collective enterprise. It's a mouthful, it's a complex idea, but we're pretty sure it gets more concrete and hands-on as we move on. So a professional learning community actually is a particular format in which a group of teachers, school leaders, and sometimes also teacher educators meets to work together to exchange experiences and share knowledge. Professional learning communities allow teachers to collectively determine their own learning goals and trajectories. Professional learning communities can be used to discuss, to test and reflect on educational innovations and how they can be translated into classroom practices. Opening up one's practices to others and eventually going back to those practices is what constitutes the central dynamic of a PLC, a professional learning community, making it a potentially powerful environment for professional growth and development. The goal of this seminar is to inform you about practices and experiences with PLCs in Africa, Asia, and South America, apologize. At this point, I would also like to welcome the 4 presenters, actually 5 presenters of today, of the different contributions to this webinar. So welcome. We'll start with a bird's eye perspective to get a state of the art on the use of professional learning communities as an effective way to create opportunities for professional development for school leaders, teachers, and system leaders. And to do so, we'll first discuss the findings of a systematic literature review on PLCs in countries in Africa, Asia, and South America. A systematic review made by Nguyen and Ellen Boeren, both from Glasgow University. After that, the general overview, we'll get 3 inspiring practices from Rwanda, South Africa, and Uganda, more in particular STIR education. They are presented and each practice focuses on specific aspects or characteristics of a PLC. So we hope to make this webinar an interesting combination of presentations, inspiring dialogues with academics and practitioners, and an exchange among educational professionals. Okay, let's move on then to the first presentation, which is entitled A Systematic Literature Review on Professional Learning Communities in the Global South. Professional learning communities are important for quality education, as they play an important role in the professional development and motivation of teachers and school leaders. And it is obvious, the quality of education can only be as high as that of the teachers who enact it. VVOB has a long history in strengthening professional development of teachers and school leaders by implementing professional learning communities in various countries in Africa, Asia, and South America. And therefore, VVOB commissioned a literature study that will answer the following questions, among others: how are PLCs defined? How and by whom are PLCs initiated? Are effective PLCs sustainable? Is working with PLCs a costly endeavor? And so on. The two presenters, let me briefly introduce them to you as well. First, we have Dr. Nguyen. He's a lecturer in educational leadership in the School of Education at the University of Glasgow in the United Kingdom, known for his research in educational leadership and professional development and learning for school leaders and teachers. He's done more than this systematic literature review and published on the topic as well. And his literature reviews and empirical research have addressed important aspects of professional learning communities like teacher collaboration and teacher change. And the other colleague involved in the first presentation is Professor Ellen Boeren, who specializes in adult education. She's got 15 years of experience in working on large international educational projects. For example, she managed the Scottish team in the Horizon 2020 projects in Leven, encouraging lifelong learning for an inclusive and vibrant Europe. She works as a consultant on the European Commission's Working Group on Adult Education and Training, and has undertaken a secondment with the OECD's Directorate for Education and Skills. Professor Boeren also edited the UNESCO's fourth global report on adult education and learning, a report that contains a wide range of recommendations on adult education, both in the global north and south, based on a survey with over 150 UNESCO member states. Professor Boeren is the editor of Adult Education Quarterly, and she is also very experienced in systematic literature review, many of them which have been published. So after this introduction of the two specialists on the topic, but also on the methodology of comparative and exhaustive literature review, it's my pleasure to give the floor to the colleagues from Glasgow. Please go ahead, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Geert. I'll basically kick off. Yeah, I just quickly want to say that Dong and I have been working on this project in the last few months. And what I quickly, the introduction to us was already very extensive. What I basically want to add as well is that we're based at the University of Glasgow, which is like, of course, one of the leading international universities on the QS ranking, where, for example, number 38 in the world now, joined with Leuven University, where I'm basically like a PhD graduate from myself. Mm-hmm. Basically, one of the core aspects that we do in our school is we've done lots of projects with the Global South. So in the UK, we had a program which was called the Global Challenges Research Fund. So we were actually one of the top leading schools in the UK to get funding from that specific funding stream, which has now come sadly under pressure. So we're very happy for VVOB to give us an opportunity to continue our work with partners in the Global South, because that's really a kind of track record in our school that we've built up in the past. Now, I've basically managed the project, but of course, my colleague Dong is way more from a kind of topic perspective, way more of an expert in everything that has to do with school leadership and work in schools. I'm more of an adult educator. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Dong, who has been the lead researcher, and who will give you an introduction to the methodology, the outcomes of the project, but also some of the recommendations that we want to give to VVOB to take this work forward. So Dong, over to you.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah. Can you please show the first slide, please? Oh, okay. Sorry. No, I mean the. So I think. Okay. Good afternoon from the University of Glasgow. Thank you for your very nice introduction, Ellen. And my name is Nguyen again, and I'm a lecturer in educational leadership in the University of Glasgow, where I lead the Master in Educational Leadership. It's my pleasure today to share with you some of our insights from the systematic review on PLC in the Global South. As we know that the benefits of PLCs is very promising, and many of its positive impacts have been evidenced to some extent. Yeah. So, and I think the question now is more that how to enhance the benefit and the positive impact of PLCs, and to do so that we need, I think it takes a global village to make efforts to try to support the PLC, especially in the Global South. And it's, I'm delighted to see that a wide range of audience today, from teacher educators, researchers, teacher, and school leaders, and other practitioners. So please let me share with you some of the insight we get from the review. And if you see in the slide here, currently, this is all we want to share with you today. Yeah, we see the central point here, the PLCs. And then we try to, and in this evidence-based framework, so we try to address these four major questions to some extent. How are PLC defined? How and by whom are PLC initiated? And what are the impacts or the benefits of PLC on professional development for teachers and for school leaders also? And again, very important thing here, the conditions for initiating, for implementing, and for sustaining PLCs. But before I share with you details about this evidence-based framework and some of the recommendations for actions, let me go with you through the process, how we build this evidence base. Next slide, please. So you can see from the PowerPoint here that we set the time frame for our review. So we were keen to review the research published from January 2000 to May 2021 as continuity of Louis Stowe's review and other review works published in the early 2000s also. And I'm sorry, but we are only able to review the articles in English. And you see in the K-12 settings and the peer review journal articles. And I really apologize that if your helpful contribution to this kind of topic were not included in our review just because the scope of the review, but I'm sure that they are important contribution as well. Next slide, please. And you can see that this is the review process. So we started with our search in Scopus. Scopus is one of the most comprehensive database in educational and social sciences. So that's why we decided to use Scopus with these search terminologies here for your information, please. And then when we key in these search terminologies, that we identify over 3,000 hits. And from this over 3,000 hits, then we went through the process of screening and evaluating qualities, and finally we analyzed 70 empirical articles in detail. Next slide, please. And yeah, so there's a few notable characteristics of this evidence base from our review. So number one, you can see in the slide here that there has been a visible increase in the research interest of PLC in the Global South over time, especially for the past 5 years since 2016. I think this is a good sign for the research communities. And this I hope that this will inspire the PLC in practice in the area. And the next slide, please. And the evidence base, yeah, you see the heat map here. We got contribution from 12 countries in the global south across 3 continents. And you see that you see China made the most contributions. I think it's understandable because, and this evidence base has been mainly drawn from, you see that the empirical research in China. And then next is we have a 15 contribution from South Africa. And then in other countries in Asia, there's Malaysia contributed, I think it's 12 articles there. And then we have a representation from other countries like Belgium and Turkey and so on. Yeah. Next slide, please. And then in terms of methodologies, that actually the evidence we constructed it from the range of empirical investigation using like different approaches, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method research. And actually, there's a relative balance in the use of quantitative and qualitative methods if we compare with the research on other topics like teacher leadership, where qualitative research seems to be predominant. But here that we see a kind of more relative balance in the use of qualitative and quantitative evidence. I mean, data. Thank you. The next slide, please. Yeah, okay, we're back to the model we constructed from the review. Yeah. So to address our first questions that how are PLC defined? So when we analyze the definition used in this final list of 70 articles, that we see that actually there are 4 complementary perspectives to conceptualize PLC. You can see the first box. The PLC could be conceptualized as a network of professionals. And these professionals share a common interest in learning and teaching, and a design for collaborative improvement for student learning and school improvement. And this network importantly function and ideally on the basis of equal sharing and collaborations. And the members in a PLC network have a certain degree of professional interdependence. They support each other. They have a complementary expertise. And PLC could also conceptualize as a space for professional learning. And it might be like in physical form or virtual spaces like we are doing now. And such spaces tend to be intentionally organized, deliberately organized with the aim of promoting collaborative learning, collaborative inquiry, professional dialogue, and other collaborative activities. So, and the third approach to conceptualize PLC as a strategies on approach, and this is one of the 3 popular approach and important approaches to professional learning for teachers, together with lesson plan and coaching, and formal coaching. And PLC as a process also could be the process of establishing a collaborative environment, a collegial environment to promote learning for teachers and school leaders. Yeah, and how are PLC initiated? You can see that we see 3 approaches there. We conceptualize 3 approaches. There may be other approaches, but this from review, we see 3 approaches. Contrived approach. Yeah, so refer to the initiation of a PLC as a mandate to implement a top-down policy. This we can see in many articles from China. In China, the PLC, they call it the teaching and research group. So it's as a result of a national initiative. And we have a project-based approach that involves initiating PLC as a part of professional development projects or action research project. Yeah, and then group-based. We were delighted to see some example of PLC initiating as a result of the emergent needs of small group of teachers and school leaders to address their, together to address their challenges and to support each other. And we can see some of the examples, for example, from South Africa. Yeah. Okay. So why PLC? Because the evidence showed that PLC has a positive impact And the positive impact, you can see the slide is on collaborative learning, collaborative teacher learning. Yeah, that is obvious. And then we also got evidence saying that the participation in PLC support teacher development for their self-efficacy of teaching. They feel more confident in teaching. Yeah. And then also when teachers participate in PLC, that they have a more kind of sense of like receptivity of changes and more motivation to initiate changes, positive changes, innovative changes in teaching. And last but not least, the PLC support teachers in building trusting relationship. When they work together effectively, fruitfully, tunefully, their trust for each other would be enhanced. This is got great evidence for that. Okay, but to have this impact, we need like a conditions, some condition for PLC, and these conditions include the leadership support, can be like a support in terms of visioning a PLC, providing structural and individualized support, acting as a source of intellectual stimulation, and importantly, a school leader develop like a collaborative and reflective school culture of learning. And then we need to have a readiness of infrastructures, which I refer to like a time structure, communication mechanism, technological and financial resources, and space for professional learning. And also, PLC must focus on learning and teaching to motivate teachers to keep teachers like a sustained motivation to participate in PLC. So, and then depends on the quality of relationship, the professional relationship in the PLC. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. And yes, give me 3 minutes, okay? To share with you 10 evidence-based recommendations here. Yeah. So number one, we really call for greater leadership and policy support for PLCs. Yeah. And then, for example, can be allocation and priority for essential human, technological, and financial resources to implement important initiatives within PLCs. And so we sympathize with teachers for their heavy load of daily administrative and teaching and assessment work. And teachers tend to experience a sense of extra work in engagement with activity of PLCs. So on this basis, actually, we feel that there's a really need to structure time for participation in PLC within teachers' workload. And then such a supportive time structure would sustain their engagement in collaborative professional learning linked with PLCs. And of course, PLC, as I said just now, it should focus on learning and teaching. And it's important to avoid turning PLC into places to mainly just deal with the daily administrative issues. And the vision, goals, and agenda for PLC should focus on learning and teaching and be clearly communicated with the members. And promoting PLC agenda for diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just for excellence. Yeah. And I think there's a few more that is important that we acknowledge, we theorize, and we try together to address teachers' inherent tensions and challenges in participating PLCs. They face a lot of challenges and they need support. And same for teachers, school leaders need support also. Support through like a formal professional development program to develop their skill and knowledge, competencies, like to promote their schools PLCs. And also support PLC for school leaders sometimes. Yeah. And finally, that's a few more for researcher, for the research community that develop an evaluation framework for development together with the practitioners, work with practitioners to do so. And then PLC doesn't stand alone. To maximize the impact of PLC, we need to see that how PLC can complement other model professional development. And this is a very important work for the research community and for the community practice. And we hope that like a non-profit organization like a VVOB will continue to support this work for the research community and the community practice. Thank you very much and welcome questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dong. To be concise and within the time limits on such a complex issue, as the, let's say, the international research on the implementation of PLCs. We have now time for a couple of minutes of time for clarifying questions. So anybody who wants to ask a question to the presenter. Okay, here already comes a question. Based on the literature review, how can a school leader show support or be supportive towards a PLC, as this is a condition for sustainable PLCs? Can you be a bit more specific on what it could look like?
Thank you very much. This is a very important, is an excellent question. It's very important to address these issues. So our research evidence has shown that the practices associated with the transformational leadership and instructional leadership will have to promote PLC. But what do we mean by transformational and instructional leadership? So I can take an example, like supporting the visioning of PLCs. Yeah, they may not direct the vision, but support the whole community of PLC to build their visions, and also all provide and allocate the structure support. Structure support can be structure time. To make sure that participating in PLC doesn't add another layer of administrative work for teachers, and also providing where applicable, individualized support for each. For the PLC, just sometimes just emotional support for the members, and also act as a source of intellectual stimulation for the PLCs. Yeah, and yes, last but not least, develop a cultures of this supportive culture within the school. That will influence PLC also. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You've been mentioning a number of conditions that are important. One of the things you did not mention, but apparently many people are wondering in terms of the needed infrastructure. And for example, based on this literature review, what could you tell us about the kind of infrastructure and the findings on online PLCs? What infrastructure is necessary, and more in particular, is there any research on the not face-to-face, but the use of online settings to get a PLC, going?
Yeah, another excellent questions. Yes, so when we refer infrastructure, we broadly refer to like a time structure. So again, whether it's online PLC or physical PLC, practitioner need time, and the time must be within that workload. That's important. The time structures. Another thing, the technological structure. So we shouldn't assume that all member or all teacher and leader have an equal, equitable access to the technologies, and they need support with that also. And then communication mechanism. The thing is that if we only communicate like a formally through the administrative documents, it doesn't work sometimes. It doesn't work. So we need a variety of channel communications. Yeah. So and then they need a safe space. It can be virtual, can be physical, but must be safe, where they can feel like a safe to share their challenges and to contribute the ideas, to help each other for mutual support to address those challenges. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I've got a final question. I'm looking at the time as well. You talked about the evidence for the improved learning and the improved changes of practice based on the literature review. But one of the questions is, how is the evidence for these changes, and so the effectiveness of PLCs, how is that provided? How is that made visible? And more broadly, I suppose, how can we know when or whether PLCs are actually making a difference to the practice of the people involved?
This is very critical issues. That's why we say that in our review, we found no studies or no articles or no model that support the evaluation of PLC over time. Now, evaluation is a very important process for any model's professional development. Currently, we like the evaluation model to see that the impacts. And when you see people see the impact, people feel more inspired to do that. And also when we see the impact, we see how to enhance the impacts. So that is why I think it's important that we have we construct together with the researcher and practitioner, we construct an evaluation model. But the evaluation model must be based on the evidence and must be designed to support the development of PLC. It's not just to give the people the sense of, oh, they are evaluating us. No, we are supporting you. And for the next step of PLC, it's maybe doing like a yearly evaluation. And if we can see the impact over there, we feel more inspired to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this last question and your comments constitute a nice transition to the three next presentations, each of which will elaborate on how PLCs are actually enacted in different countries' contexts. And so let me introduce you to the second presentation. So once again, thank you very much, Dong and Ellen, for your contribution. We'll move on now to the, let's call it the case from Rwanda, which is entitled The Professional Learning Communities in Supporting School Leaders in Rwanda, Building Resilience Post-COVID-19 Lockdown. So you can see from the title, it's a very up-to-date, very actual issue that is addressed here. VVOB Rwanda, in collaboration with partners and the Rwanda Education Board, have supported professional learning communities of school leaders to build resilience and to cope with the effects of COVID-19 as the schools reopened afterwards. So school leaders participated in the PLCs to strategize ways to bring back dropout children to school and provide them with emotional support. This presentation is brought to you by Ms. Nathalie Aziza, who is a professional in education with 11 years of experience in professional development of school leaders and teachers, early grade learning and basic education. She has successfully led and managed the development and implementation of education programs. She holds an MA in Development Studies and a BA in Education, and she's currently working with VVOB Rwanda as Education Advisor to support and advise on the implementation of effective school leadership and management through professional learning communities. So from her experience, I think she's absolutely well qualified to contribute today to our discussion. Please, Ms. Aziza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Geert, for the very nice introduction. My presentation is going to take you through best practices from PLCs in supporting school leaders to build resilience and cope with COVID-19 effects in Rwanda. In this presentation, we get to understand the background of professional learning communities in Rwanda. And we also look at the government of Rwanda policy on school reopening, the strategic plan on school reopening. We also have to look at the role of professional learning communities in supporting school reopening. And I'll also share with you the role of professional learning communities in supporting school leadership, in building resilience in post-COVID-19 lockdown. And then we get to hear some best practices and experiences from some school leaders. If we talk about professional learning communities, next, please. Professional learning communities are part of professional learning networks, which have been created by VVOB Rwanda in collaboration with the Rwanda Education Board and the University of Rwanda, with the purpose of complementing the diploma and certificate courses of head teachers and of school leaders. Professional learning communities have the purposes of deepen the CPD at school level. And also they have the purposes of supporting the implementation of the competence-based curriculum. And on top of that, they have the purposes of assuring that school leaders are assuring the well-being of learners and also assure the learning outcomes. Rwanda Education Board considers two kind of professional learning networks. One is professional learning communities, which are the networks of head teachers and deputy head teachers, in which they meet for peer learning. They are a form of learning sessions, which are conducted on annual basis, and they share in those sessions best practices. And these professional learning communities are initiated and led by the sector education inspectors who have been trained by VVOB Rwanda on the education and mentorship coaching. We have also other type of professional learning networks, which are community of practices. We call them community of practices, but this one are for teachers, either new recruited teachers and experienced teachers. But this one have the purpose of helping them to improve their teaching and learning skills, and they focus on subjects in schools. They are led by school-based mentors and school subject leaders, but also this one have been trained by VVOB on the education and the coaching course. As this presentation will be much focusing on PLCs, let's understand how these PLCs are structured with maybe specific examples. Head teachers and deputy head teachers meet at sector level. It means leaders from the same sector gathered at sector level to discuss challenges that they have in terms of leadership and management. They identify and brainstorm on different challenges. Then, because this is a peer learning, they agree on one high priority, which they have to work on the whole year. They go in their schools, do a kind of analysis of the root causes, and also develop a plan of implementing so that they can work on that priority. But they have to identify and agree on strategies so that they can overcome that challenge. Let's take, for instance, an example of using English language as a medium instruction. When school leaders meet, they will agree on using those instructions so that they can discuss how best they can contribute to overcome those challenges. So the whole cycle is of 4 sessions, and these sessions, they share practices and come on one best strategy that they will document and share learning at the end of the session. PLCs did not support in the good period, but also they were used by in Rwanda to support during COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. So when schools were reopened, PLC members were exposed to different challenges which are related to COVID-19. And these were in terms of assuring that all learners learn at the same level and dealing with high drop rates. And to overcome those challenges during the lockdown, PLC members have been trained and supported by Rwanda by using VVOB Rwanda by using the UNESCO toolkit, which were adapted to our context. And this toolkit was a way of helping them to collaboratively share and discuss how they can strategize on different challenges that they will meet when school reopen. They also dealt with how these challenges, which include on teaching and learning, and also building resilience after COVID-19. In the support that they get, they were supported to organize online meetings And also they were trained on using digital tools, devices, so that they can develop best strategies that they will use in terms of health and hygiene, teaching and learning. And more, on top of that, they developed monitoring and evaluation plan to ensure that when schools open, school leaders are ready to start supporting learners. When after school opening, the first PLC sessions of school leaders gathered, and this way focusing on identifying key challenges that they have. So we can see that among key challenges that they identified, 33% of them, they were in terms of dealing with high dropout rate. And 23% of them, they were in terms of working on poor performance of learners. And others, they were in terms of dealing with absenteeism and the irregularities of learners. So different plans and strategies were put in place so that they can support learners. And we can see some results from some school leaders as next slide, as testified by one of the head teacher, saying that when school reopened, she had 16 young girls, adolescent girls who were impregnated and they dropped out. But using the PLCs, she has been able to learn from the colleague about different experiences, which included home visiting and counseling. Then those young girls were brought back to school. 14 among them were back to school, and 13 of them sat for national exam. So she appreciated that PLC helped her to put in place strategies to bring back young adolescents to school. Next. Teachers also appreciate that professional learning communities are used as a way of helping them to improve the teaching and learning. Because as this is testified by our teacher Clement, he's saying that when head teachers are coming from the professional learning communities, best practices are cascaded at school level because they share practices, and among those practices, the teachers also are able to improve the teaching and learning. So according to him, he thinks that professional learning communities are good because learning are shared among the whole school community, which help them to improve teaching and learning of learners. So briefly, those are best experiences from Rwanda. We have many more of them, but we decided to talk about dropout and improving teaching and learning. If there are some questions, they are welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathalie, for this concise elaboration. And it's also nice to see how your presentation actually already took up one of the comments and questions to the first presentation related to the infrastructure that was needed to make PLCs work online, which you've nicely addressed in your example. Yes, there are a few questions arriving already for you. Just an informative question. You talked about the different types of communities. We were wondering, are there also mixed PLCs where head teachers and teachers collaborate or mingle or constitute together a PLC, or doesn't that happen? And probably, and if it doesn't, are there good reasons not to?
Currently, we are focusing on ensuring that school leaders improve their school leadership and management. And for our understanding, PLCs are peer learning. People from the same level, learning from each other to resolve problems. It's very good that school leaders first of all are focusing on school leadership and management challenges, and also teachers are also focusing on teaching and learning challenges. They are not mingling, but the supervision and the support from school leaders and the sector education officers are still there to support them. So maybe let's hope that if we will have some challenges that can bring them together, it can be good. But the peer learning is first of all for people from the same level and same field. That is the professional.
Yeah. Okay, and there's another question. It's in a way related to this one. It's about to elaborate a little bit on the role of what you call the section educator inspectors who facilitate PLCs. Because, for example, in Belgium, the inspection, so the inspector who evaluates the quality of education is strictly separated from the school advisors who facilitate and support the learning and the quality improvement. So apparently in your context, the inspectors also facilitate professional learning communities. And I would, to make it a bit more sharp, the question, doesn't that constitute a conflict of interest?
Sector education inspectors are in charge of overseeing education and other related education in their sectors. They have in their responsibilities head teachers and teachers. So they are the ones who supervise the running of education in their sectors. It means head teachers are under indirect supervision. They supervise them. So it doesn't create any conflicts because PLCs are for head teachers. The sector education inspector works as a coach to facilitate and help, just to give them a guidance, not create or maybe have also their own PLCs. Sector education inspectors are just there just for coaching and giving support to school leaders so that they can be able to work on their professional relationships.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that, because as we see, the word inspector can mean very different things in different contexts. And it's quite important for a good understanding to at least also know what are the responsibilities of people who are in different contexts labeled inspectors. Thank you very much for the questions also. Thank you very much for your answers. It's time to move on, and we move now to South Africa with a presentation which is entitled "The Strengthening the Professional Development of Teachers and School Leaders Through the Implementation of PLCs." And then the subtitle, it's VVOB's South African Story. The South African Department of Basic Education has identified PLCs as key to improving educational outcomes. VVOB in South Africa supported the efforts of the DBE in implementing and supporting the development of professional learning communities throughout the country. Together, they have been consolidating their knowledge and experience in PLCs through a series of innovative initiatives such as online courses, video series, and pamphlets to increase advocacy for PLCs. The presentation of this South African story will be brought to you by Mr. Paul Mphisa, who works for VVOB South Africa as a program advisor. He has been working in the education field for more than 20 years as a teacher, a researcher, a project manager in various areas of education and for different organizations. Since joining VVOB in 2016, he has mainly focused on teacher education and the capacity development of district officials. Of particular interest for him has been the role of professional learning communities in the continuous professional teacher development. Please, Mr. Mphisa, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I would like to tell my story catchers that they would please have to move the slides for me because it doesn't seem to be working from where I am. So if you could already move the slide, yes, I can talk about the overview there. So what I'll talk about quickly will be the why, how, and for whom of PLCs in South Africa, give you a few success stories and the challenges, the lessons of experience that we have gained, and the innovation and the future that we are building, and then concluding remarks. Thank you. So in terms of the whys and wherefores, really in South Africa, we discover that we are really lagging behind in our educational outcomes, behind our peers and behind the international community, really. And so the Department of Basic Education has identified the continuous professional development of teachers as key to improving educational outcomes in South Africa. A planning framework was developed in 2011, which is called the Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development. A very clumsy acronym there. And this is where the whole plan is identifying continuous professional teacher development as key, and with PLCs playing a particularly important role in this. So we see it says PLCs. In PLCs, educators taking control of their own professional development, and the fact that PLCs help educators find autonomy, a sense of belonging, and increase their confidence, and therefore improve their level of confidence. It also says PLCs as positively influencing teachers' teaching strategies, and thus having the potential to improve education for all learners. Next slide, please. And this is a timeline of what we have been doing in South Africa with VVOB and the Department of Basic Education. Starting back in 2014 in a province called Lejwe in the Free State, we have our PLC, our first PLCs were started there. And then about 2015, 2016, we had capacity development in all the provinces in which identified officials were trained on PLCs. We piloted the first PLCs in Muteo, lesson study type of PLCs in the Free State again. And then from 2016, we were fortunate enough to have funding from the European Union, and using this funding, we piloted 12 PLCs in 3 different provinces up to about 2018. And during this time, we were able to develop videos and develop pamphlets, and I'll talk about this just now. We also had a project where we trained 50 teachers that were identified as coordinators with 25 subject advisors who are district officials responsible for different subjects, in order for them to learn more about PLCs and start PLCs in their different circuits. And then by 2020, we had developed online PLC courses. And later that year, going on to this year, we had also developed COVID online courses. You'll see at the bottom of my timeline there, we also, with the Department of Basic Education, around 2015, developed PLC guidelines. And the South African Council of Educators also developed their continuous professional teacher development learner management system, in which they could track each teacher's professional development activities, and they award points for each of those. With the European Union funding, we also were able to run symposia. We had one in 2017 and another in 2018, which were focused on the professional development of teachers. We had international speakers, and we had lecturers from universities. We had national department officials, provincial officials, district officials, principals, school teachers, and other NGOs. And so we had all these people together in one room, and we shared quite some very, very rich discussions. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons of experience that have come out of South Africa, and many of which are confirmed by the local and international research, that all stakeholders really have to play their part if we are to have effective PLCs. all the stakeholders that I mentioned, initial teacher education, universities, NGOs, national, provincial, district officials, principals, and so on. PLC focus and constellation can be varied. By focus, we mean that PLC can focus on a particular subject. It could be math, it could be languages, or it could be broader and focus maybe on learner diversity, dealing with learner diversity or inclusive education practices or discipline or things like that. And in constellation there, we mean that you can have teachers in one school coming together in PLCs. You can have teachers from different schools coming together in PLCs. We've seen this working. We've seen rural schools and urban schools coming together and these PLCs working very well, and so on. PLCs we found are needs driven, and this adds to the motivation of the teachers because it is driven by what they really need to be doing. The PLCs require mutual trust and respect, and this leads to increased collaboration. There needs to be collective responsibility for student learning. In other words, the teachers themselves, when they go to PLCs, they need to prepare. They need to take that responsibility to be able to share quality discussions with other teachers. And the facilitation of sessions is critical. It requires particular skills, including directing proceedings, enabling participation, and coordinating sessions, which can make or break sessions, really. Thank you. Next slide, please. We find that in order to get to high-functioning PLCs, we will need this initial push from officials to kickstart PLCs. Teachers will not just wake up one morning and just decide to start PLCs. They actually need to be supported, encouraged, and so on. And that PLCs need to meet regularly if they're to be more effective. That departments and NGOs can support PLCs to use data-driven approaches such as error and item analysis, lesson study, action research, and so on. So you need that support to the teachers in order for that to be achieved. And department officials can encourage PLCs to invite experts who can provide input in certain difficult topics or can use their own content expertise to support a PLC to consider new approaches. Next slide. So now we have been engaging in a period of innovating and looking into the future. And what we have done is we have seen that we need to look at different modes of presentations in order to reach more people. So we have developed pamphlets, videos, and online courses, and I want to talk briefly about those. Next slide, please. So we have developed pamphlets which we distribute around the country to the districts and to the schools. These pamphlets will talk about what are PLCs, explaining the whole concept. How do you get PLCs to be started where they are not started? How do you get them to be more sustainable, more effective if they are there but are not operating optimally? They are aimed, these pamphlets, at teachers. Some are targeting school principals, some are targeting district officials, and we distribute them in that manner. You can see just a slight picture there of one of the pamphlets that is aimed at school leaders. And you can see that there's that ability for a QR code there, in which leads you to further information on PLCs. Next slide, please. We also have developed videos. These videos are also used for advocacy, but also explain certain concepts of PLCs as well. We've got 4 videos so far. One of the videos illustrates these ideas of facilitation and coordination of PLCs, which, as I said earlier, we really find quite critical skills. Another video talks about the support for a PLC through inviting experts to give input during PLC sessions. Another video summarizes and illustrates the key messages of PLCs. And there's a last video which also is a series of testimonies made by teachers who participated in the inclusive education PLCs that I said were funded by the European Union from 2017 to 2019. Next slide, please. Now, one of the most exciting innovations that we have now are online PLC courses. This started in 2019 before the appearance of COVID, but now with the living with COVID as we are, it has just become so very relevant. We've got these 3 courses thus far: a basic PLC course, which is targeting anyone who wants to learn more about PLCs in South Africa; an extension course 1, establishing effective PLCs for educators who want to establish a PLC; and then extension course 2, supporting PLCs in your schools, which is targeted at different district officials and school managers who want to support PLCs in their schools. Next slide, please. And then we were fortunate enough to have some funding from LEGO. And with LEGO, we decided to develop PLCs that were actually targeting or concentrating on what was happening because of COVID-19. So we have 2 types of courses here. We have those that are aimed at educators, and we have those that are aimed at SMTs. So it's those who want to establish PLCs to learn around COVID-related topics. For both educators and for SMTs, you will see that how do you respond to the situation of COVID? That is what the courses actually do. Next slide. So it has been quite exciting for us, especially as we got onto these online courses, because now this has added a new dimension. We do not have to do capacity development face-to-face all the time, which is only up to a certain scale. But now we can scale it much larger. Anybody in any corner of South Africa, and indeed in the world, can now just log on and learn more about PLCs and expand their knowledge. South African teachers are still not very confident with their ICT. They need to be pushed on a little bit to use ICT, but we are seeing this as an opportunity for them then to get on to using their ICT skills. And teachers can learn CPTD points here when they get onto these courses, and these courses are 0 rated, so they do not use data as they are working with this. It has been quite exciting for us as VVOB, and in fact, working with service providers in developing these courses, we've learned quite a lot. And we've actually had our colleagues going on to develop other courses. We've got courses on gender and courses on early childhood and so on. So we're thinking that with all of this, PLCs are going to be even more popular in South Africa as they become much more accessible. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. It's always rich stories and always the frustration of the time limits. We have time for one question, and I'm just reading the question that was dropped to me. You talked about the efforts to increase the number and the performance of PLC. So what is the impact of making or trying to have more PLCs, and who, when there is more PLCs, where do they come from? Do people autonomously start a PLC, or do they address VVOB for support? How does that operate?
As I indicated earlier on, there's been quite a lot of training. Really, we've done capacity development in all the provinces in the country. So the district officials are the ones who have the who carry the burden of starting the PLCs. But teachers who have also heard about PLCs want to start PLCs, then they get their support from the district officials. Mm-hmm. And that is how really basically around the country PLCs are starting. Okay. In terms of impact, really, we have not really started directly, but we have seen that teachers, as they collaborate more, actually teach better. And anecdotally, and just by observing, we can see that there is some improvement that starts to happen in the classes, but we still have to do a proper research to get this kind of information.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to stop here with the questions, but as the efforts to increase the number of PLCs is undoubtedly also related to issues of motivation, and that is exactly the topic of our last presentation that is entitled PLCs in Uganda, driven by intrinsic motivation. The presentation is brought to us by Ms. Brenda Akite Otika. She will discuss how STIR education has used the principles of intrinsic motivation to design and deliver professional learning networks for teachers and officials in Uganda. She will outline how this links to Uganda's national teacher policy, as well as share examples on the ground on how the approach has changed the practice for those working actually in the field. A little bit of information about our colleague. Ms. Brenda Akite Otika oversees government relations and partnership work in Uganda. She has experience designing training materials for teachers and officials under the STIR program. She was intrigued actually to join STIR education because of the great belief they had in the teacher as the solution and not the problem of the learning crisis. Previously, she also has done work with the Women of Uganda Network, an international organization that empowers women and youth to achieve sustainable development through ICTs. So please, Ms. Akite Otika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Geert. The presentation I'm going to make shares our experience in sustaining intrinsic motivation across education systems. STAR Education is an international organization that partners with education systems to reignite intrinsic motivation in every teacher and official to role model the foundations of lifelong learning for every child. Our program is based on a number of activities within the education system, and the activities are designed to reignite intrinsic motivation of all the stakeholders. When we talk about lifelong learning, we refer to social-emotional skills that learners are able to develop as they go through the learning process. We look at skills such as engagement, skills such as safety. We look at curiosity and critical thinking, but also intentional teaching. STAR Education's program aligns well with the government priorities. We have the national teacher policy, of which one of the objectives is strengthening in-service and pre-service teacher training so as to enhance competencies to effectively deliver quality learning outcomes and leadership within the education system. So when we look at the national teacher policy, our program contributes towards the aspect of school-based continuous professional development. One of the priorities of the national teacher policy is to ensure that there is an established institute, that is the Uganda National Institute of Teacher Education, which will be in charge of overseeing all continuous professional development courses across the country. Then we also have another policy, which is the Teacher Incentive Framework for Uganda. The Teacher Incentive Framework looks at strategies to motivate the teacher. It highlights both short and long-term strategies that are focused on motivating the teacher. As STAR Education, our focus is more on the intrinsic aspects within the Teacher Incentive Framework. And we look at things to do with peer learning among the stakeholders within the education system. We look at things to do with observation and feedback. We look at aspects to do with training of the officials, but also of the teachers. So STAR model focuses on strengthening the system. Our work focuses more on explaining the importance of intrinsic motivation. And through the model, we take a system-wide approach to professional development. Currently, we are implementing the model in partnership with Ministry of Education and Sports in 40 districts, municipalities, and cities across the country. So within those districts, we operate in all government-aided primary and secondary schools, and we work with all players within the education system. We work closely with the state actors at the national level. We work closely with the primary teachers' colleges, that is for primary education. And then we also work closely with the Association of Secondary School Head Teachers in Uganda, because at the moment there is no clear structure to support the secondary education. We also work to promote a love of lifelong learning across the system, and we recognize that one group of stakeholders has great impact on another. Next slide. Yes, in terms of how the STORM model works, we place a lot of emphasis on role modeling and relationships at all levels of the system. And when we talk about role modeling, we look at the demonstration and promotion of behaviors that we would love to see in others. And research shows that line managers have a greater impact in terms of what experience their supervisors have within the workplace. So our model places emphasis on the relationship that exists between the supervisors and the supervisees. So we look at the relationship between the head teacher and the teachers. We look at the relationship between the head teacher and the district education officers, but also looking at the relationship between the district education officers and the state leaders at the national level. The STAR model is based on 3 core principles, one of it being peer networks. For all the stakeholders that we work with, they have the opportunity to come together, reflect, and learn from one another. So when we talk about peer networks, we look at regular meetings of small groups of peers to strengthen the connection between them, to foster mutual support, and also to ensure sustainable improvement. When they come to reflect, they're able to get feedback, support from one another, and it gives them the opportunity to continuously improve and become better. At the teacher level, they have opportunities to meet monthly, and then at the school leader level and at the school leader level, they have the opportunity to meet twice in a school term, that is at the start and then midway the term, to reflect on their experiences. And then at the official level, they also have the opportunity to meet termly. The second principle is action and feedback. When we talk about action and feedback, it's basically giving opportunity to the stakeholders to practice new evidence-based strategies that are introduced during the peer networks, and then they are able to implement those evidence-based strategies. They have the opportunity to be observed either by their peer or their supervisor or a district official, and they are given feedback that supports improvement. And then finally, we have reflection. At the end of it all, each stakeholder having the opportunity to look back and reflect on their experiences, to adapt their practices, and also update their actions to embed the learning that they have acquired. Next. So this diagram basically shows an illustration of how our learning improvement cycle runs. And the learning improvement cycle is basically a continuous improvement process that teachers go through that brings out the 3 key principles of peer networks, action and feedback, and reflection. So at the school level, we have the teacher networks facilitated by the head teacher. So because a school term has approximately 3 months, we have each month teachers having the chance to participate or engage in a professional learning community. So how each of these meetings are structured, we have a first meeting where a strategy is introduced to help the teachers understand the strategy in depth. And then we provide them a model example. The model example helps them to see and appreciate how the model can, how the evidence-based strategy can be implemented in their classroom. They then have a chance to discuss the model and get into contextualizing it to see, yes, this is a strategy, this is how it can be used, but looking back to their classroom environments, to their classroom settings, how best can they adapt that evidence-based strategy to suit their learners and also to suit their classrooms. And then they are able to come up with an action plan on how they are going to implement this strategy in their upcoming lessons. Still within the network meeting, teachers have opportunity to share their action plans with their peers, who then give them feedback on what is strong about the action plan, what can they improve to help them have greater impact out of that. So by the time each teacher gets out of the network meeting, they understand the strategy, they are confident. So the principles of intrinsic motivation that we focus on is autonomy. So when we look at in the network meeting, a teacher has opportunity to practice, to decide on how they are going to utilize the strategy to improve their learning. And then we look at mastery, which is more around the teacher practicing. And then by the time they leave the network meeting, they are confident. And then that takes us to developmental classroom observation. So in between the two meetings, the teacher has opportunity to implement the strategy in their classroom, receive feedback, and when they come back for the next meeting the following month, they share their reflections and go through an additional strategy, and the cycle continues. Next slide. So basically, based on a longitudinal study that we carried out in partnership with Rebecca Thornton from University of Illinois and then Ichuli, initial findings show that officials are actively engaged in teachers' professional development. From the stakeholders that we sampled, 60% of the officials actually spent time away from their offices supporting teachers at school level through observation and feedback. We also found that teachers are actively engaging their learners, including praising them for effort that they've put in, calling them by names, treating both boys and girls equally. And about 97% of the learners who were sampled expressed the feeling of safety in the classroom and in the school environment. Teachers also consistently reported trying out new evidence-based teaching practices, which are introduced during the STAR network meetings. And then finally, teachers are very active in engaging in peer observations to learn from each other. In fact, in one of the districts I visited, the DEO of Ginger district was able to share with us how teachers struggle to be observed because of the benefit. They find that when they are observed and given feedback, it helps them to improve their practice. Thank you so much. Any questions are welcome.
Okay, sorry for that. Thank you very much, Brenda, leading us through this final presentation. There's time for a couple of questions. Let me start by one. You mentioned the effect of one group of stakeholders on the other. And can you maybe elaborate on how different groups of stakeholders contribute to the learning process in a STIR network?
Thank you so much, Geert. So what happens is at the start of the program design, we co-design the content together with representatives of Ministry of Education and Sports at the national level. And then when it comes to delivering training, this is also done by the system stakeholders. So once we have designed the content in partnership with Ministry of Education and Sports, we then have them alongside STAR deliver training at the National District Official Institute or workshop. Mm-hmm. So through the training, they have opportunity to give feedback to the district officials on how their facilitation is, what they are doing well, and what they need to strengthen. So this feedback helps them to become better leaders. Likewise, when it gets to the head teacher training, which is facilitated by the officials are able to give quality feedback to the head teachers, and this is based on the practices or observation and their experiences in getting feedback from the state actors, but also from the officials. So likewise, the quality of feedback that the head teacher receives from the official will also inform the quality of feedback that they give to the teacher.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I suggest that we leave the questions specifically to your presentation here. There is another question that I could ask, and that at the same time will then open up to the wider discussion. It's the question, where does a PLC fit into the system-wide approach? And what are the other ways to achieve professional development of educators? It was a question raised, Brenda, to your presentation, but I guess it is an opening where all the others can join, and then we can move into the final general discussion at the end of this webinar. So please, to you, Brenda. So where does the PLC fit in the system-wide approach?
Thank you so much, Geert. In terms of where it fits, I've already highlighted there is a policy in place that provides opportunity for continuous professional development of the teacher. So what we basically do is we are supporting in ensuring that this happens. We recognize that there are different challenges that hinder teachers from accessing professional development, but we feel that if it is taken to the school level, then it's able to widen up the platform and the opportunity for more teachers to access it. For instance, through the STAR model, it gives each teacher an opportunity to at least participate in 2 CPD sessions in a particular term. However, we are also working closely with the new institute that has been formed under the National Teacher Policy, that is the Uganda National Institute of Teacher Education, to see how some of this content is actually uploaded through their platform, so that teachers outside the districts where we've been operating in partnership with Ministry of Education are able to access the content and also help them to develop further professionally. Thank you.
Okay, very much. Is there anybody else who would like to address this issue of how PLCs as, let's say, a local meeting format of professionals actually fits into a more system-wide approach related to professional development?
Yeah, if I can come in then.
Mm-hmm.
So in South Africa, we see that there's quite a lot of professional development that is actually conducted by the department itself. You know, when you get teachers, but you can only get them for 2 days or 3 days, maybe sometimes for a week, and you will not be able to train them to the full extent. So what is encouraged is that those 2 days, 3 days that you might have there, you will give as much content as possible, and then teachers should be able to go on to take that learning into their PLCs, where they can go on to try out the ideas that they have learned and come back and reflect in their PLCs and share their experiences and so on and go on. And in that way, then you are able to learn more than if you are simply having a 2-day or 3-day workshop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Dong, did you want to comment, or I thought I saw you react?
Thanks. Yeah,
please.
So yes, so thanks. Now as we presented in the we mentioned in the first presentation that PLC function on the ongoing and collaborative basis. Mm-hmm. And then normally they are closely connected with their own school context. Yeah, but also PLC doesn't stand independently and alone as a platform for professional development. We argue that based on the evidence, we argue that it should go hand in hand with like a lesson study model, with like the model of instructional coaching, with the model of formal professional development courses provided by the universities, provided by the researcher, and so on, the community of researchers. So to maximize the impact of professional learning on teacher development and student learning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I think that was a question that took PLCs as the starting point and then zoomed out to the system. Basically, I would like to bring in another complex issue that has the opposite movement to look inside the dynamics of the professional learning communities. You've, one way or another, most presentations have stressed the importance of trust to make professional learning communities work, the importance of good collegial relationship as a condition. Now, there has been done research as well that says that when the relationships are too positive, when colleagues get along too well, when they feel too comfortable in those meetings, that has a negative impact on the real critical discussion, the real thoughtful reflection. And secondly, what about the inevitable risk of conflict to appear in a professional learning communities? By conflict, I mean difference of opinion, because in educational issues, you very quickly get to points where there are different possibilities, different values that can be at stake. So, so on the one hand, there is the comfort when it gets too comfy, when the relationships are too positive. On the other hand, there is the inevitable threat of tensions and conflicts. And I'm quoting a colleague from the States, Betty Ashenstein here, who basically argues that in order for a professional learning community to really promote professional development, the members should embrace conflict rather and deal with it rather than be afraid of it. Now, from your background, from your experience, what would be your comment on that little bit provocative statement?
Okay, I can go.
Yes, please, Don.
Okay, thanks, Fred. I think this is very interesting and also very complicated issues. Our review found that trust is to have a certain degree of trust among colleagues is a starting point to encourage teachers to get actively involved in PLC. And over the time, when they work together, they collaborate together. They collaborate. And then if the collaboration is effective, then the trust will be enhanced. But when we enhance to a certain level, that it turns into like, if we are too comfortable with each other, you say that strong degree of collegiality is good, but we're too comfortable, then the innovations, there will be some impact on the innovation there. Now, so my comments will be like, it's good to sometimes to have like a positive disruption to enhance the innovativeness and innovations within PLCs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then again, don't be afraid of cognitive conflicts. The conflict here should be like constructive conflicts. It shouldn't be destructive conflict. If emotional conflicts, maybe that's harmful to PLC. But cognitive conflicts, people bring together different perspectives. So one of the ways you can do that, sometimes we just invite external speakers, external practitioners to share their perspective, and if then to see that we can learn from each other. So yeah, so I maybe I leave some speaker to give some examples from that context. So.
Mm-hmm. Any further?
If I could come in also. On the side of the conflict one, I think that one is much more, let me say, I have seen that one more than the other one where the teachers are much more comfortable. So I would say that in all the a training that we provide and talk, or where we talk about PLC, we really talk about this idea that there will always be a conflict, but people must be able to understand that it is not personal and must always try to argue in a constructive manner and not by attacking each other. And so people must respect each other as professionals. And also the facilitator, it is very important that they also try to control these kinds of discussions so that they don't get out of hand.
Okay.
When we are talking about being very comfortable, I must say that it makes sense when I hear it, but I have not really experienced it. But so I would say that probably in a situation where people really no longer feel that they are being challenged by a whole lot of in their profession, then that is when they would relax and really feel like they are out there or having tea and just having nice discussion and not being very constructive. But in a situation like the one that we have in South Africa, where there are real critical daily challenges in the classroom that teachers face, that stage we are not yet at, and I'm feeling that we will take some time before we get that relaxed situation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I would like to quickly give the floor to Nathalie, and then we'll have to conclude, please.
Thank you very much. For the case of Rwanda, when PLC members meet, they have also to look at building that good relationship. In each PLC sessions, there are some key enablers like how the collaboration is being implemented and giving opportunity to each one to ask questions and challenging each other. It's something that they have to work on daily basis and also on during each session. I believe that giving them this flow at each PLC session to evaluate themselves. How did we go through this PLC session? How did we discuss about the purpose and the collaboration and challenging each other's? It gives them the opportunity of reducing the conflicts, and if it's personal, they have first of all to resolve them before also they go to the discussion so that they can support each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathalie. And I feel now in a very awkward position of having to kill a discussion that is launching itself and is actually calling for more time and more in-depth debates. But there is something like a time limit. I thank all the presenters for being here. I really also thank the audience for being with us. We know that we were not able to answer all the questions that were raised during the webinar, but the organizers will pass them on to the presenters to answer via email, and all the materials of this webinar will be online. If people want to participate in one or more of the upcoming events, they can still register on the website www.eNSPIRED.net, which you probably will know because you've registered for today, and questions can be mailed to info@eNSPIRED.net. Once again, thank you all very much for being with us this afternoon, and all the best with your work within or outside the professional learning communities. Have a great day. Thank you.